Hello, everybody. We are live with a variety of guests to answer the one of the most interesting and intriguing questions of the last 6 months in the Gamergate controversy, and also something that has purchase on the social justice phenomenon more generally. My name is Marley Yiannopoulos. I am the technology editor of Breitbart News, and I'm joined by a number of people who will introduce themselves to you in due course. We will. Oh, I have forgot to do something. 1 second, sorry. There we go. I had forgotten to mute my own channel. I'm going to allow my guests to introduce themselves one by one themselves. The purpose of this stream is to discuss a claim made by Sarah Nyberg, who some of you will know on Twitter as SRH Butts or Sarah Butts from various other places, that the way she described herself as a child molester, in her words, as a paedophile, as a pedo, 10 years ago in chat logs on a website she ran, FF Shrine. She claims that this was edgelording. She claims that she was doing it for attention, and that this was not a real expression or indication of who she is or her desires or beliefs. A number of people have come together to question that version of events, and I'm going to speak to some of them over the next hour or so to give readers and listeners and interested parties a fuller perspective and more information about those claims so they can judge for themselves. So I'm going to start with Leo. I'll go just along the line as I see it on my screen, which I hope is the way that viewers see it too. I'm going to go along the line, just ask people to introduce themselves briefly, and perhaps give 1 or 2 sentences on their relationship to this issue and the person in question, and then we'll get into how the story came out, what the story is, and move on then to talking to a couple of people who knew Sarah Nyberg at the time. Let's start with Leo.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leo Pirate. I'm a YouTuber, make videos about video games, and I know Sarah Nyberg from Gamergate. I noticed this person as an early critic of the entire hashtag, but the problem with their criticism was that they said some of the most insane things that had nothing to do with video games. They would say that Gamergate has to do with neo-Nazis, that it has to do with white supremacy, and I would read these tweets from Sarah Nyberg and wonder what any of this have to do with video games, and I would notice that they would tweet them consistently, almost like this person didn't have a job all day. I've interacted with Sarah Nyberg on Twitter, and for those of you who want to know more about me, you can find me at leopirate.com. I don't have a Twitter anymore, but we'll talk more about that later.
We will. We certainly will, particularly in light of what's been happening in Paris, where I've noticed that you can get banned from Twitter for mocking feminists and for asking perfectly reasonable questions of those who create public platforms themselves and place themselves on public pedestals as arbiters of public morality. But if you are a Middle Eastern terrorist, you can apparently use the platform to recruit and advertise with impunity. It's an extraordinary set of preferences, extraordinary set of priorities for Twitter to have, which you, Leo, were unfortunately the victim of. But anyway, I'm gonna move along the line as I have it. In a beautiful, what color is that? That's sort of a pinky, reddy. I don't know what color it is, but it's lovely. Frozen Binary. Say hello to everybody.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Frozen Binary. I am a YouTuber who makes videos about whatever interests me. My involvement in this is I used to be a member of FF Shrine, and I know the user Kyrail that was in your article, Milo. I basically interacted with Sarah a few times, and I didn't necessarily agree with what she had to her response to my disapproval. And then I basically found out that she was part of Gamergate. I was like, who is this person spouting off a bunch of nonsense? They seem familiar, and once someone told me about the FF Shrine linkage, I had to just basically jump in.
Thank you. We will be definitely coming to visit you later on in the stream. Next up, we have M, if you would like to say hello.
Hi, I'm just gonna go by M. My screen name's tied to too many things to feel comfortable with saying that, but I use.
Go right ahead with M.
Yes. So, I used to be a member of the RMRK forums, and that shared an IRC channel with FF Shrine for a brief time. I actually got to be friends with Sarah in the past, and not so much anymore.
Yes, well, we'll find out why later. Next up, with the obviously judiciously chosen icon for the evening, is John.
Hi, I'm John. I was the anonymous source, excuse me, that Leo referred to in his video, and I was the one who found the IRC logs that were released in May, and the one who located the relative that Sarah talked quite a bit about in those logs.
Okay, thank you very much. And next up we have Paul.
Hello. I usually go by Roth, and I posted a load of IRC logs of my own IRC logs, and I knew Sarah for a number of years. I was a regular member at FF Shrine, and yeah, I can't believe the hypocrisy she kind of practices now, trying to paint people as pedophiles. It's quite ridiculous.
Thank you. Well, we will get into all of that. Let's start off with Leo, if we can, and John too. If you wouldn't mind muting while you're not speaking, just to avoid interference, because I'm getting a little bit of a buzz, that would be tremendous. Yeah, it's gone now. Leo, talk to me about how this story came across your desk in the first place. How did you become interested in it? And talk us through the discoveries you made and the information that you published in that first video.
Sure. Over, I'd say now Gamergate has been lasting a year and a half now, but near the beginning, when it was just a hashtag to expose corruption in the game industry, we noticed a slew of people on Twitter who would only enter the discussion to disrupt our investigations into the game industry, and Sarah Nyberg was definitely one of them. And what this person would do is take screenshots out of context from 8chan, from Reddit, from Twitter, sometimes from people who have nothing to do with Gamergate, and then say this represents the entire Gamergate hashtag. They've made claims that a hashtag has shared child pornography. They said that Gamergate represents, Elliot Rogers. It's absolutely insane. So I looked more into this person, and I noticed that they weren't really interested in the discussion what Gamergate was about. They were much more interested in kind of defaming it, making it look bad. And I wasn't the only one interested in who Sarah Nyberg was. And eventually, over time, this website called Encyclopedia Dramatica collected all of this information on Sarah Nyberg, their previous activity, the websites they run. And back in January of 2015, so just the start of the year, they had released an article that basically exposed Sarah Nyberg's activity, saying that this person was a pedophile, that they have very particular tastes when it comes to age. And I read some of the chat logs, but it was too much of a shock for me and many others. We actually thought it was a joke. It was kind of short snippets as well. They only highlighted a few lines. And I remember looking at that and thinking maybe they were just joking, right? This person's a pedophile. They're saying that their preferred age is 5, 6, and 7. I'm like, maybe they were just making a joke in IRC. I don't really care, but this is still ridiculous that this person ever made a joke that distasteful. So that was in 2015 at the beginning of the year. Didn't think much more of it. What happened was that website that hosted that article, Encyclopedia Dramatica, they got banned from Twitter when they started interacting with Nyberg, saying, hey, you are the one who owned this website, FF Shrine, here's the who is data, and here's evidence that you also hosted pirated music. Suddenly, after they posted those tweets, the entire account got banned. That's when I got interested again into Sarah Nyberg. I'm like, what? Why would someone get banned just for exposing, the awful things this person said? I went back to the chat logs, and that's where I found John over here. He came to me, and he said, you should read the full chat logs, not just little snippets. Once I started to see the whole context of it, I realized that these weren't jokes. For years, over a span of years, this isn't a one-time joke, Sarah Nyberg has consistently expressed interest in younger children, and when you see them talk about the legal aspects of pedophilia, you have to wonder, is this really a joke? And that's pretty much how I got interested in the case again. And then I made a video because I wanted to spread the word as far as I could to people that Encyclopedia Dramatica got banned for exposing this self-admitted pedophile, someone who, in their own words, described themselves as a pedophile. So I wanted to spread that out as far as I could, made that video, and yeah, that's kind of what got this, ball rolling.
Yes, it was. And on the 11th of September, I published an article following your lead in many respects, the headline of which was, if I remember precisely, which I think I do, leading Gamergate critic Sarah Nyberg claimed to be a pedophile and apologized for white nationalism. Because, of course, it wasn't just the child stuff, was it? There was quite a lot of weird and wonderful claims and remarkable expressions in these chat logs. Speaking strictly, relating strictly to what you have read and what you've seen in the course of your research, tell us, and you can be as thorough and as explicit as you want, tell us what you read in those logs and why it worried you, and then we'll move on to John with the same question.
Well, of course, the legal aspects of pedophilia did make me worried, but specifically about what they were saying. And I know I shouldn't relate this to Gamergate. I noticed many of the claims they said that Gamergate is a white supremacist group, they share child porn, they're all pedophiles. I started to see that theme expressed in the chat logs themselves. I saw Sarah Nyberg defend, or rather apologize for white nationalism for an extended conversation where they argued that white nationalists are stereotyped in the media. If only people understood and listened that pedophiles are shamed the same way in the media, and that, Mein Kampf isn't really what you think it's about. They said some really crazy things that I couldn't believe came from the same person that is denouncing Gamergate for the same exact thing. So I felt a need to sort of highlight that in the hypocrisy of the kind of tweets that they spread around. There was also claims about comparing white nationalism to feminism, saying that white nationalist is racist in the same way a feminist is sexist. So, I found that very interesting, because today I'm sure many people consider Sarah Nyberg to be a progressive critic, right? Mm-hmm. And here they are basically comparing it to white nationalism, saying, it's almost in the same way. They're both misunderstood. So I had to spread that as far as I could in the video. But, yeah.
John, you presumably had a similar experience reading through some of this stuff, and you also did some detective work to connect the dots. Now, obviously, many of the viewers of this stream, and some people who follow this story, are going to know that there's a young girl involved, so we're going to refer to her as Alice throughout this stream, as I did in my report. And I would appreciate, I'm not a great person for policing chats and comments or whatever, but I will take efforts, I think, to ensure that she's referred to as Alice, because I think it's a responsible grown-up thing to do. Yeah. So let's try to stick to that for the course of the stream, if at all possible, everybody. John, talk us through what you read, what you saw, and what prompted you to sort of start digging yourself.
What prompted me to start digging back in January of this year was when people found out who the person behind SRH Butts was. And just out of curiosity, I started doing a little Googling, and all over the place there were folks describing her as a pedophile. And this was like 3 or 4 weeks after she kind of went on a crusade to get 8chan shut down and to cut off all of Hot Wheels, the owner of 8chan, all of his funding, his PayPal, his Patreon, that sort of thing. So it really threw up a red flag for me. I didn't find much at the time other than a whole bunch of people describing her as a pedophile secondhand. But I continued looking in May, and that's when I found the set of IRC logs that were hosted on her server. When I had dug back in January, there were references all over the place to IRC logs that had been stored on FF Shrine, but had obviously been wiped to hide the evidence more or less. But I was able to find those logs, and I don't know, just reading them, the whole pedophilia subject, I mean, it was a daily thing. And it was something she brought up constantly. The relative, she talked about pretty much on a daily basis. So, I combed through them. I released them. and eventually I had the idea, what if I could find Alice, and I managed to do it and confirm Sarah never gave particularly specific details about her, like her last name or anything like that, but there was enough detail in the logs to basically confirm that I had found the right person.
Well, she did give her. She gave her precise relationship to this.
Right. That was the strongest piece of evidence, because everything else was like hair color and.
Right, and then she uploaded pictures by her pictures she described as being of Alice, described her exact relation to her, and then described more disturbingly in some detail her feelings for her.
Correct.
Okay, so Leo, you've looked into a lot of these claims, a lot of the social justice warrior stuff. You've been very active on the internet for some time talking about these sorts of people, and you've also been, you're also somebody who sort of knows internet culture extremely well. Talk sort of listeners through what Sarah Nyberg's defense was to this stuff coming to light, and then I'm going to ask you afterwards how credible you find that defense before we bring in some of the others on the stream. Let's talk us through first what the general thrust of her defense was, and then what your first response was to it.
Sure. When the first video came out, some really strange things started to happen. I expected to be shared on Twitter, but the chat logs that I had hosted for the video got taken down. The web archives that John had gone through to prove that each of the chat logs were in fact hosted on Sarah Nyberg's website. Okay, there's no hacking on a separate server. This was on her website that she had saved. Those were taken down. I got banned from Twitter, and I started to realize that these people that many people call social justice warriors, I thought it was kind of like a straw man position, an extreme name calling. Oh, you're just someone who disagrees with you, they're a social justice warrior. After this event, I realized that is a very real kind of person. These people, of course, got me banned from Twitter. They tried to, I have saved tweets of them trying to find my online activity. They went around asking other people what other usernames I go by. They really tried to find anything they could to discredit me. And then going back to what you asked, what did Nyberg say in response to all this? I never got a response from Nyberg about my video. But they did release an article saying that all these chat logs, all these claims about me being a pedophile, they're real, but I'm just being an edgelord. And an edgelord is someone who makes these jokes to deliberately offend people, but they're just joking. I don't know about that claim. I don't know how much validity it holds when these jokes, if you will, lasted over a span of years. And as John had said, it was on a daily occurrence. So imagine every single day saying this joke, over a span of years, on forum posts as well. And then I think the most damning piece of evidence that I don't believe Sarah Nyberg is joking, they shared child porn links to a website known as 12chan. Now, I didn't know much about it, but on Encyclopedia Dramatica, they happen to have an article about this website, and it is a now defunct child porn website that was taken down that had subboards called Boy and Girl, and I forgot the other. And the links that Sarah Nybergs were sharing from were from that board called Girl. And if you search the chat logs, you do a grep on 12chan, you can see every instance of where Sarah Nyberg shared these child porn links. If someone was joking, would they actually have child pornography links to share? That's the question that I think I think is on the minds of many people who read that.
I think a lot of people have been asking that, and they've also been asking, as you alluded to earlier, why somebody who is just trying to shock, and we've all, I think probably possibly everyone on this call, certainly me, and most people watching will have wound people up for pleasure. I think we all, if you're involved in any degree in internet culture, you have quite a healthily developed sense of Schadenfreude. But there's a difference between that, isn't there, and asking about and sort of discussing the legality of various, specific claims, activities, and whatnot. And also, it doesn't strike me as the behavior of somebody who just wants to shock, to go on extended rants about how pedophiles are unfairly viewed by society and whatnot. That strikes me as more pathological. And it strikes, I think, everybody as more pathological when you read it, for example, in Salon, a publication which recently has, it seems, been trying to rehabilitate people who are attracted to children. with a series of sort of guest op-eds from somebody we may discuss later, almost seeking to sort of re-legitimize something that the progressive political left in the UK, for example, were trying to do the same thing in the 1970s. The Paedophile Information Exchange, PIE, was supported by somebody who's only just retired as the deputy leader of the Labour Party, and a number of other senior figures in the Labour Party. This is not without precedent. What Salon is doing, and what Salon as a publication is, sort of its weird editorial priorities at the moment where this issue is concerned, and not without precedent on the progressive left, which may go some way to explaining why so many people came out in defence of Nyberg, which we might discuss later. I think now is the point to bring in Paul, who goes by Rofe online, and ask him if he can sort of flesh out anything he's heard already, and perhaps also respond to this issue of edgelording, whether or not it's plausible for Sarah Nyberg to claim that she was just trying to shock. You were there at the time, weren't you? Why don't you talk to us about it?
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't fly with me at all. I mean, there was a certain edgelord kind of culture around then. It was when 4chan was kind of the whole height of its internet game, if you will, and many people would share the memes and things like that. But Sarah would go out of her way to go on about paedophilia. It was almost a daily event where Sarah would go on about either her own obsession with children or trying to defend paedophilia. She would often express the opinion that paedophilia was the paedophiles were they were kind of oppressed and things like this, and she would often share links to either articles or even pictures that would make you kind of think twice and make you feel a bit dirty. I just don't like it at all. You
were there at the time, so you saw a lot of this unfold in real time. What was it that first put you on? What was it that first made you think this isn't just attention seeking? There's something more to this.
Just it was daily, in and out. It was the way Sarah kind of defined herself. One of the first words she would use was as a paedophile. Transsexual usually came second to that. It's she would often go on about Alice. She would often be very kind of excited as a date would approach, where she'd be visiting the family and thus seeing the cousin. She'd often be very sort of excited when she came back. She'd be happy to share achievements, if that's the way to put it. Like I'd managed to hug her, or we talked about so and so, or I got to tickle her, and it's
quite disturbing stuff to hear back, isn't it?
Yeah, and with hindsight, more so, definitely.
And just to remind people who are listening, Nyberg was perhaps 21, 22 at the time. Throughout most of this was happening. How old were you, and how old was Alice?
Yeah, I actually was a teenager at this time. Sarah was early 20s, and Alice was excuse me, Alice was 7, 8, 9, around this time.
Yeah. Well, let's bring in. It seems to be the consensus that people who were there at the time don't quite buy the edgelording defense. Let's bring in somebody that Sarah spoke to more directly, and just hear. I think listeners will be interested to hear this story of what it was like, rather than to be overhearing or to be present on these discussions, to be on the receiving end of some of what we're now expected to call edgelording. Em, could you come online for us?
Yes.
Could you talk us through what happened to you?
So I had joined RMRK probably 2005, 2006, somewhere around there. I was probably 14, 15 at the time. When I had gotten there, our IRC channel for our forum had kind of merged with the FF Shrine IRC channel, and there wasn't a whole bunch of mention of pedophilia or anything just outright by Sarah at that time. So whenever anyone would refer to Sarah as a pedophile or anything, I would just assume it was some sort of running joke. And we actually got to be pretty good friends. We would chat pretty regularly about just normal, boring stuff, and occasionally those chats would sort of edge into inappropriate role play, where Sarah would make really strange and rather inappropriate requests of me, knowing that I was well underage at the time.
Can you give us an example of what they were?
Well, she would want me to role play as her mother, and she would want to be like an underage child, very young, and then say things like, "Oh, mommy, tickle me where where it's wet," and I don't really want to talk too much more about that.
I understand it's not pleasant for you. I'm sorry to ask. So she was at the time assuming the role of the younger child.
Yeah, and it would be one of those things where just I was younger and really kind of edgelordy myself and kind of desperate for attention. It's a really embarrassing time. So eventually, like, I would kind of start to respond for maybe one or two lines, and after that, just really get too uncomfortable to continue and not really talk to her for a while after that. Then she wouldn't talk to me either, and eventually just normal conversation would resume. And at the time, like, I was really into 4chan, and weird shit would go on that kind of place. So I thought it was kind of normal, but taking a look now into what was said in the past before I was introduced to Sarah and the things that she said to me, it makes me feel really kind of sick and complicit and all of that. So
what I think I understood is that she would force you into these positions that you. I don't want to ask you to speak any more about the sort of explicit content of the discussion unless you want to, but just so that we understand, she would sort of talk you into these situations where you would play along, and then you would be uncomfortable. You would withdraw from her for a while, and then she would withhold attention from you when you tried to make contact again, sort of in punishment or something like that.
No, not in a negative way. It's just very obvious that it was an uncomfortable situation, and we did have a kind of friendship at the time as well. So it would just stop the contact for a while, and then we'd resume conversation as if nothing had ever happened. And it was one of those awkward type of things.
Yeah, of course it does. How many times did this happen?
Over time, not that often, but repeated contacts of that nature, probably 3 or 4 different times.
And was she generally the instigator of this?
Yes, because to some extent we would talk about femininity because I was a really huge geek and I was really fat at the time. I wasn't, I was also going through puberty, so I didn't feel super feminine, and, she was going through transition, so we would, we had a lot of things in common, I guess, in that regard, because femininity was a new concept to us, so it was really kind of comfortable to talk to someone about that, but it would kind of sometimes she would show me pre-transition pictures, and that kind of evolved into her showing me a picture of her in panties that had been a minor get on 4chan. So, and it just kind of went from that to her talking about some of her desires to have a mommy that would take care of her and things like that.
But not take care of her in a way that perhaps most mothers did.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's leave it there for now, at least. Thank you. And I want to bring in Frozen Binary here, and just ask you. You've obviously watched a lot of the. You've watched this drama unfold, and you know some of the people involved in this. When you hear that story, and you read again this sort of edgelording defense, what goes through your mind?
I'm quite disturbed by it because that's the reason that I moved away from that community in the first place. Although I've never actually seen anything like that. That's actually a lot worse than anything I was aware of at the time. The thing that made me think it wasn't a joke is the frequency of it, as described earlier. But the fact that they would also show pictures, the specific pictures I saw weren't posted by Sarah. It was another user, which I'll get into. But they were of a young girl, probably around about 8 or 9, tied up in a chair in like a dank basement or some shit like that. Not dank as in like MLG dank, the other kind of dank. And I thinking it was a joke, I just kind of made the offhand comment like, hey, could you not post pictures of whoever you've got locked up in your basement? and that just kicked off everyone in the chat to then basically paint me as a target. And I was basically like, well, this kind of content is not legal, even ignoring the moral aspect of it. I was like, it's not legal. You can't host that kind of shit. This will get you taken off. And they then started arguing about the legality of it and basically mocking my position, saying, oh, no, it's not illegal. Who gives a shit? I'm like, yeah, you go ahead and post that on other websites and see how far you get. You'll piss off the wrong person who will retaliate against you.
So this was the sort of environment that Sarah Nyberg was hosting 9-10 years ago. This sort of discussion, these sorts of pictures.
Yeah, this would have been about 2008, 2009, so even a little bit more recently than that.
Oh, I see. 2009, you say?
Roughly around then. It was sometime when I was in college, and I was in college from 2008 to 2010.
Okay. So what we're establishing is sort of a pattern of, let's continue for the sake of argument to call it edgelording, that goes, not just to public outrage spectacles, but also to private communications and in some cases intimate conversations with specific individuals. And also happens over a period of years. And this was going on as late as 2009.
Yeah, the user Kyril that I invited on my stream can corroborate that. Yes. In fact, I had to leave after that because of she took it really seriously that I was so upset with this kind of content being posted, and she basically gave me an ultimatum: I could shut up about it or I could be banned. And I decided to shut up, but only because I wanted to get the contact information of the one person I talked to on there and bugger off.
So you were threatened with a ban for expressing discomfort with pedophilic material?
Yes. I consider it to be sexually explicit, and they did not. And that was, I think, the crux of the argument there.
And who was the administrator of this chat room? Who was in charge of it?
I don't know offhand. I believe it was Sarah because it was her site. But there were sub admins that she would give authority to.
Right, but it was on her site.
Yeah, it was ultimately up to her.
Okay. A couple of people are asking why our stream was called Too Spooky, and it is in fact because this ought to have been hosted at Halloween. I'm sorry it wasn't, which is entirely my fault. So sorry to anybody listening and to people asking that question. Leo, let's bring you back in again. Where do you see the story going from here? Because it seems to me that what's happened is a variety of progressive commentators and figures, because Nyberg is so crucial in her constant stream of misinformation about Gamergate and various other people and movements. She's so essential to them in terms of providing ammunition, however low quality that ammunition is. There's a lot of it. That they were so reluctant. They were reluctant to throw her under the bus. Indeed, they didn't, and many of them came out in support of her, despite reading what she had to say. One guy even tweeted a picture of his own daughter to her to cheer her up. And then
Father of the Year.
Yeah, exactly. And then later said that he had personally verified that she hadn't committed a crime, but that on any other account he just didn't want to discuss it. I can't wrap my head around I can't wrap my head around a pathology that will stick by somebody who describes himself in this way. And we haven't even got to, we've covered perhaps 25% of the things in my initial report and in Leo's coverage. Would read all of this and would think, well, yeah, okay, but she hates the right people, so we're going to stick up for her. I can't wrap my head around that pathology. But it seems to be what's happened, and she's of course gone back merrily to tweeting endlessly about Gamergate and about me and you and various other people. Where do you see this going from here? I mean, what's the next step? It seems to me that anybody reading the edgelord defense is not going to be taken in by this, and after listening to this stream, I think it's going to become an untenable position. But what happens now? She seems to be merrily tweeting away. She's still got support. I mean, what does it take?
Well, I'm really glad, first of all, that you wrote that article, and if I hadn't said it before, I'm now saying it on stream. Thank you so much for actually creating that article, because you had a legal team review the evidence, so
It
there's
cost
really
us
no
an
debate.
enormous amount of money.
Yeah, there's pretty much no debate on that.
We blew Breitbart's legal budget for the month on that, if not for the year.
But as for what is to come, I'm very glad you brought up these people and how they're willing to defend someone just because they hate the right kind of people. The way I see it, I really don't care whether or not they believe me or the facts or the evidence. They will stand by Sarah Nyberg no matter what. And this event really opened my eyes to this kind of tribalistic behavior. I assumed that if I had showed them the right piece of evidence or maybe proved to them, maybe the child porn links, I thought that would have been the real eye-opener for some people. They just don't care. In fact, I've had some people tell me, well, since the website's down, you have no proof that that's child porn. And I'm like, it's from 12chan with the extension girl, and everyone in the chat logs were reacting in horrific ways. You're seriously going to tell me that she was sharing cat pictures from 12chan? I mean, no. I don't know where this will go.
John, what have you seen? How have you seen people's responses and reactions to Nyberg change? I mean, certainly some people must have distanced themselves now.
A few people have. I mean, most of the places I've looked have been places like Gamergazi and Shit Reddit Says and those kind of places that are sticking up for her. And there are dissenting voices in there. It's just that they tend to get removed real quickly because those places are rather authoritarian.
I see. And I mean, I haven't seen her pop up in the media or in be quoted again as she was, I think, by the Washington Post at least once.
Yes.
A tweet embedded.
Right.
Post. I haven't seen that happen again. But how would you assess that? I mean, I'm trying to understand, the psychology of these people who just don't care about this stuff. They just don't care. They evidently don't care whether this is real, and we're going to get into, some of the other specifics later. But it's clear to me that they've decided that they don't care if it's real or not, and they're going to support her anyway. What's been your assessment, John, of the effect on her influence? Has any of this stuff coming to light? And we know now that she and all of her supporters have read all of it. What's been the sort of pragmatic effect of all of this? Is there any point to people continuing to expose just what terrible people these social justice warriors are, or should we all give up?
I mean, I think it's important to get the truth out there in a case like this. But she still has the same group of sycophants, really, who will retweet everything she tweets, who will take everything that she puts out there as gospel. So, I mean, as long as they're still around, she's going to have some influence. But it's obvious that there are a lot of folks on the other side who realize that all of the things in your articles were true, all the things in Leo Pirate's video were true, and that they only cover a small portion. I mean, those logs are huge and go for years, and really the things that were uncovered in those videos and in your articles were only kind of scratch the surface. And I think there are a lot of people on the other side who they're not speaking up just because they don't want to lose their place, more or less.
It's an astonishing position to be in, isn't it, where calling a spade and expressing disapproval of a pedophile can endanger your position in the social justice hierarchy. It's a remarkable place for us to be in. You mentioned that the reports only scratched the surface. I'd like to go to Paul, to Rofe, some of you will know him as, and ask, as somebody who has been through even more of these logs than I have, possibly been through more of them than anybody else, and certainly without the time to witness it. Talk to us about what else is in there, and the stuff that hasn't yet come to light, or that wasn't included in the report, the things that just are yet to be uncovered.
Well, I mean, I joined FF Shrine sometime, I think around early 2006. I started to become really active and became friends with a number of regular members, friends with some of them even today. But I also became good friends with Sarah, and we would often talk in private, often every single day, and she got me talking a lot on website stuff, She taught me, as I was learning HTML and PHP, things behind websites and things like that. She got me started on this kind of stuff. And as we became better friends, she would often begin to share things with me that were more on the sort of pedophilia kind of side. She would share more things about Alice. She would share pictures she'd taken sometimes, or she would share information about when she would go to visit her.
Is this pictures of Alice?
Yeah, she would sometimes share pictures uninvited. I mean, I think she would share them to multiple friends of hers. I think I was just became included on that list because we become good friends.
So she was sending unsolicited images of her 8 or 9-year-old relative.
Yeah.
What kinds of pictures?
I definitely remember some of them being, I mean, the term didn't really exist back then, but basically creep shots. I mean, it was clear she didn't.
Can you explain for people who don't know what a creep shot is?
Basically, where it's clear that the subject doesn't know they're being photographed, and the the kind of focus of the picture is more kind of perverse in nature or sexual, like trying to get a picture of a bottom or something. It's climbing out of a chair or something like that. I mean, there's the well-known picture now where she was in a bikini when they went swimming.
What was your response to those pictures at the time?
Mostly thinking, why on earth would you take that picture, and why on earth would you keep that and upload it with the collection? I mean, fair enough, you might take a load of pictures and then you delete the ones you don't like or they came out bad or something like that, but yeah, it was just quite off-putting, really.
And are you still in touch with Sarah Nyberg today?
No, she actually she blocked me. We kept in touch. I left FX Shrine around 2009-ish. We kept in touch on Facebook and Steam, mostly on Steam. And she blocked me around the start of Gamergate when there was the whole drama with Aaron Joni posting his big blog post about his ex-girlfriend's abuse and all that. And that internet aristocrat guy, or Mr. Mercateur, made those videos. And I linked to one of them to a bunch of Steam friends, including Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember her reaction was she kind of went into a sort of fury at me. Like, how dare you link this? Why do you hate women and all this kind of stuff? And I remember being really confused. Like, do you know these people? Why would you react like that? And so, of course, I linked the next video to get a similar reaction.
It's your own minor little contribution to edgelording.
Yeah, and she blocked me not long after that. And I didn't know that she was SRH Butts on Twitter. I only learned that more recently. And that's what drove me to share my the IRC chat logs, because it was actually a post on Kotaku in Action, and I saw the title was SRH Buds / Sarah Nyberg, which immediately opened my eyes. It was
took you by surprise.
Yeah, SRH Buds from Sarah Nyberg from FF Shrine. Is that the same person? And so I googled Sarah Nyberg, and I found the SRH Buds article on Encyclopedia Dramatica. And retrieve my sides from the stratosphere. And apart from the whole dog sex thing, that was completely spot on, and that was a very interesting
we
read.
should address that, I suppose. This is a persistent rumor that is not true. Is that right? There's no evidence whatsoever that there was any kind of molestation of an animal.
Yeah, that's just copy pasta from somewhere. But this article already had IRC logs. They'd already had the ones that were uncovered earlier in the year, which I hadn't heard about, and they already had some of my own IRC logs because I used to upload some of them to a server of mine, and they'd found this somehow, and they already had this included, which got me thinking, do I still have the rest of those? And I did a quick search, and I still did. So, I slept on it and decided eventually to upload them. Yeah.
I'd like to come back to M, if that's possible, and ask you. You were around at the time a lot of this was going on, and you had sort of personal interaction with Sarah Nyberg. How do you feel seeing Sarah rail against people on the internet? She's setting herself up as a sort of arbiter of morality, if you like, complaining about whether it's accusing Gamergate of having connections to child porn because they post on 8chan, which seems to be an extraordinarily tenuous allegation, which only people who don't really understand internet culture could possibly take seriously. To all of the other, the white supremacist stuff, what goes through your mind when you see her accusing others of not just some of the things, but precisely all the things that she seems to have done herself? How does that make you feel?
Honestly, not too great about it. I tend to stay off Twitter because I think it's just a cesspool of negativity, among other things. But just seeing what she's posted, especially about someone like Jermaine Greer, who's recently come under scrutiny for her opinions on transgendered people, she would say stuff like, oh, well, you've done one good thing, but the hateful speech that you've perpetuated other places completely nullifies that. And I feel sort of the same way about Sarah because she was pretty brutally hateful at times and tried to justify other forms of hate that she's now speaking completely against. So it's, and then it just seems completely hypocritical.
Right. And many of us go through life and have sort of road to Damascus moments. We change our opinions on things, or we even come to realize that something we've done earlier in our life was wrong and that we regret it. But you haven't, have you, seen any instance of her being remorseful for any of this behavior? There's been no attempt at redemption, as far as I can tell.
Actually, this whole thing was brought to my attention by someone else who runs a Pro Gamergate video game Twitter, and I, kind of the same as Rofe, I was like, oh, is this really the same person? So I created a Twitter account, or got on my old one that I'd created a while back, and I actually messaged Sarah directly, and just keeping in mind the conversations that we had had, and then seeing all the logs that had more explicit things mentioning pedophilia or links to 8chan, it made me feel really sick and really uncomfortable. So I had messaged her to see, ask, is any of this true, and do you remember what you had said to me? And she was not very apologetic. Her first couple of questions are, if you find logs, then what do you think is going to be in these logs, rather than, I don't know, anything else. She had
Sounds like she was more worried about getting caught and what was going to come out than worrying about what she'd done.
She had some general insincere sounding or feeling apologies that she had made, but she was more focused on telling me that I was part of the abuse squad by, speaking out against her because I was joining forces with other people that had made negative comments about her. So it really had turned into her first trying to sort of, I guess, apologize to cover her ass, but as soon as she found out I was going to participate in this stream, it turned into me being an attacker and an abuser. So
it's an extraordinary sort of about-face, and it's something that you see much of the time with these sort of social justice warrior types. You see it a lot with Randy Harper, I think. People who started off as as what can only really be called abusive, or a bare minimum sort of, hateful and trollish, turning around and telling the whole rest of the world that they are the real victims. Is that how you'd characterize? Well, I don't want to. It's a very leading question, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. But that seems to be what I'm hearing from you. Is that roughly right?
it seems to be the case because, especially in people who are anti-Gamergate, you hear all about how a victim's point of view shouldn't be put on the back burner. You should believe the victim over the alleged abuser. And as soon as I got on Twitter, I was seeing all these supportive remarks to Sarah when the stories had come out, and it made me sort of irritated because I had kind of seen some of these things firsthand. So I would bring them up to people who would tweet messages of support, and then they would, immediately kind of turn around and tell Sarah, oh, this person's posting lies about you, rather than even considering that what I was saying might be true.
I see. So somebody that she had previously instigated this sort of private sexual conversation with, she then turned around and said was a member of an abuse squad because you decided to share with people what had happened. It's an extraordinary thing. Frozen Binary, I want to talk a little bit about the white nationalism claims. I don't know, I'm not coming to you for any particular reason
Okay.
on that, so don't be alarmed.
Okay.
But I just want to read out to people who are listening a couple of just little snatches of what Sarah Nyberg said in these chat logs from FF Shrine.
Okay.
And I apologize if the language is offensive to anybody listening, but I think it's... Yeah, indeed. Yeah, this is your official trigger warning. There's the thing about this sort of social justice stuff. Most of it's just common courtesy, you know. I mean, I would have done that anyway, even if trigger warnings weren't a thing, because it's just a nice thing to do, you know. You go around calling everybody abusive and disgusting sociopaths. I just get the impression these guys have all been hanging around the wrong people their whole lives. One is one thing that she wrote in response to a comment about Nazi ideals, meaning kill all the Jews, was, have you actually read Mein Kampf? She goes on to say, racist is a loaded word. I think white nationalists are racist in the sense that feminists are sexist. Now, I dropped out of a philosophy degree at Manchester in the north of England, but so I'm going to need some help unpacking this. Unpacking this. You guys are all a lot smarter than I am. Before we do that, one last quote. Again, apologies in advance. This is directly from the chat logs. You can be proud of being white without hating other races. You can be concerned about white issues without wanting to kill the niggers. This is the sort of language that, you know, you could plausibly claim was, as she suggested, edgelording. Yet this, like the sexual allegations, seems to go on for quite a long time in the logs. What do you make of all of this in light of the fact that she goes on to Twitter and sort of endlessly spreads the suggestion that Gamergate and people who support the movement's ideals and anybody else she doesn't like is some sort of hetero-patriarchal white supremacist? She seems to buy into this social justice narrative, but from the language that I'm reading in these logs, she is almost precisely guilty of, which she is guilty of, all of the things that she now hates so much. What goes through your mind? What's your reaction to this when you go back and read the stuff and you think, well, you said all of this, and you've neither apologized for it nor addressed it or had a reconciliation with it. You've simply done an about-face and tried to forget that it ever happened. What's your response to this as somebody who, you know, knows a lot of the people involved and has some experience with this?
Well, I just want to say that the very first statement in that whole in the whole readout would be legitimate on its own if that's where it ended. I'd be like, that's completely a legitimate argument, you know, because you can be proud of the various things. I don't understand skin color pride in it at all. It's fucking retarded. Well,
Right,
hey,
sure.
I was born a certain way.
Yeah.
What do you fucking do?
I think most of us can agree that you know, you can take pleasure in be patriotic, and it's a perfectly noble thing, because what it means is you're associating yourself, you're aspiring to values in a culture's history that you agree with, whether it's you know, freedom, democracy, property rights, or you admire the creations of the society in which you grew up, whether it's artistic or philosophical, literary or musical. Nationalism, patriotism is an understandable impulse, but most of us, I think, would prefer to be proud about things that we picked about ourselves, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's why it makes no sense to me to be proud of basically other people's accomplishments. It's very weird. Because I was always raised to, you know, basically work hard and then take pride in things that you've actually done yourself or had help for it. As far as how it relates now to the stuff that that's happening, it just seems to me that, like, Sarah's opportunistic, but like a lot of SJWs, they just saw an opportunity to basically come in and get some either attention or whatever, you know, financial benefit, or how individuals differ in their motivation. But it's just a conduit for them to get ahead somehow, and it doesn't matter about their hypocrisy. That's in the past, you know, whatever. That's how I view their rationale behind it. They don't care because they don't have to. Because they just have this thing in their lap, and it's like, well, just go for it.
Do you have any sympathy with the view that many of these social justice types, whether it's I mean, I've written about a couple of them recently. It's Randy Harper, Sarah Nyberg, or whether it's the wonderful, incomparable, my dear, sweet, eternal love, Shanley Kane. These people seem to attack precisely the things for which they're guilty themselves. And do you have some sympathy with the interpretation of the whole social justice phenomenon as a sort of way of atoning for one's own past? Because it seemed like when the Gamergate thing happened, it was a way for a lot of people to sort of whitewash their reputations, to cleanse themselves of past sins. What none of them did, though, which is what you need for that great American tradition of, apology, redemption, and rebirth, is the apology in the first place, the acknowledgement that something had been done that was wrong, and an appeal to victims, and an attempt to make amends. None of that's happened with any of these social justice warriors, has it? And it seems like Sarah Nyberg is the worst example of that.
Oh, definitely. It's the thing is, the actual apology portion is just a platitude. You actually have to do things towards it to make things right, if you can. I mean, you can't always. And that's just the way, my line of thinking. I have no sympathy for people who just kind of sit there and like, oh well, just ignore it, whatever. I'm like, no, this is we live in a linear fucking time. I'm sorry if we had like not cause equaling effect and whatnot, then it would be okay, I guess, because you could just whatever, getting all sciencey now. But because in your past leads to your future, then you have to basically, you can't whitewash it. You have to acknowledge it and then do things about it. Like, that's why I decided to not take the route of hiding anything. I made it very public that what my username was in that time, and the things I saw and the things I did.
Leo, I'd like to come back to you, and I'd like to talk about cyber attacks, and specifically about the manner in which there's sort of hypocrisy of or appears to be hypocrisy of a lot of Sarah's pronouncements about doxing and attacking, and how she actually behaves herself, and not just how she behaved 10 years ago, but how she behaves today. What have you noticed, the sort of gap between appearance and reality, if you like, the gap between the sort of claim and her own behavior, when it comes to her claim, for instance, that using personal information about somebody is a vector for attack to intimidate them, and this kind of stuff? She did, of course, brag about having people who could hack websites and people who could dox others. She was very enthusiastic about that in the chat, wasn't she? Is this just another example on top of the ideological beliefs? It's not just what she believes, but her tactics too, how she operates, appears to be another example of the hypocrisy, doesn't it? Do you have any examples or anything to share on that in that area?
Definitely. So Nyberg is anti-harassment. Excuse me. She's anti-harassment, she's anti-doxing, she's against all of these things, but you just need to look through their own Twitter timeline to see the kind of stuff they post to see that considers harassment. In fact, taking a screenshot out of context, leaving a username's information and a link to it, that is a form of harassment, saying, look at this user, you need to check this out. Yet they denounce that. And one of my one tweet that comes to mind is Sarah Nyberg saying that doxing can be used for good as long as it's to expose someone who is bad. And she's also said, for everyone in Gamergate who claims that what I'm doing is harassment, it's not, because I'm just exposing how disgusting you all are. Think about the current situation we're in right now. Sarah Nyberg has gone on to say everything that I'm doing, you're doing, is a witch hunt. That's the term that they've all settled on, I've noticed. I'm the leader of a witch hunt. And we're harassing...
There's an admission wrapped in that expression, isn't there?
Yeah. But yeah, they claim that everything we're doing is harassment, witch hunting, when it's essentially doing by their own criteria what they would expect. They say doxing is okay if you're exposing someone who's a threat or a danger to others. And given Nyberg's past and the kind of website that they ran, if a person of the age that they were interested in posted their private information in their profile and they happen to live in the same area, that's a danger. That's something people need to know about. So I don't believe what we're doing is harassment or a witch hunt. And I believe that Sarah Nyberg saying that this is all that is just an expression, another example of how everything they denounce is actually what they do.
It's interesting, isn't it, the sorts of strategies that are employed by I don't want to drag you guys into a political discussion, so I'm not going to badger you with my own opinions on this. But we'll just stick to the facts, which I think are that progressives and social justice warriors do seem uniquely to have this approach of sort of silencing, banning, these calling people abusers and harassers and all the rest of it. Talk to us about what happened. I mean, I don't know. I may be wrong about that. It seems to be that it's something that happens on the progressive left really more than anywhere else. You don't necessarily have to express a view on that, but talk to me about what happened with your Twitter account and how that is a function, if it is, of a wider approach to responding to all this. Because I noticed after my report came out and after your video came out, rather than a sort of period of dignified sort of shameful silence, instead there was a furious campaign to try to scrub the internet of anything that corroborated the claims that we had both made. Talk me through what happened with your Twitter account and how that's reflective of the strategies of these people, and in particular Sarah.
Sure. First off, before I go into that, I would say if I ever found out someone who I was a close friend with was in fact a pedophile, and or a self-admitted pedophile, and I had seen all of their chat logs, I would be disgusted. I'd probably deny it, but I definitely wouldn't try to delete evidence and get the person who spread that information banned. I wouldn't ask for that person's private information. I wouldn't do any of the things that they've been doing to me, or you, as you can see. It's a tactic that they've settled on, shaming and silencing. They will comb through all of your internet activity, trying to find anything that you said that could be made to look poorly. And they will also try to remove your ability to express more information, as they did on Twitter. What I had done is a user that goes by the name Izzy Galvez, IGL YVZX. Actually, I don't recall it off the top of my head.
No, I think we all know who you mean.
Yes. They had spread an article basically saying, or a series of tweets, saying that the chat logs are fake. And the reason why they're fake or modified is because look at these timestamp from Rove's server. That problem was it completely ignored the fact that these chat logs I'm reading from were originally hosted on Sarah's site, and the other half were also from Rof. They had nothing. The modification claim is sort of nullified when you realize that Sarah Nyberg's site used to host part of the chat logs on the front end of the site, and you can match them with the chat logs that Rof had leaked from the chat logs that are in your articles, the chat logs that are in my video. So this claim that they were edited, these years, thousands of lines of chat logs, were edited in such a way just to make Sarah look bad, is ridiculous. But that's what Izzy was doing. So I responded to them, and I shared an article debunking that claim, and that's what got me banned. I had also called him a sick fuck, which probably wasn't a good thing to do. But I don't think that should get me banned from Twitter.
I've done a hell of a lot worse than that on Twitter, my goodness. So just help me to understand exactly, because one of the weapons that these people use is this abuse and harassment thing. They rely heavily on these nebulous terms of service violations, and they use the allegation that somebody is engaging in targeted harassment or being abusive or whatever. What is it precisely that you said that you believe she was able to successfully use to get you banned from Twitter?
I think it must have been the antagonistic nature of me calling whoever was claiming Sarah Nyberg isn't a pedophile disgusting, because it was a very natural reaction for me. I couldn't believe that these people wouldn't distance themselves. In fact, they would say all of this is fake and that they've changed. And listen, Sarah Nyberg's political opinions, sure, I'm sure that can change over the years, but pedophilia and the frequency of these claims, I don't think that changes over the years. That's just my opinion. I don't know if that's in fact true, but for these people to so adamantly defend Sarah Nyberg and to erase, just like internet user her story, erase these kind of people who have real experience with that, it just goes back to their tactics. And as for what you're saying, what did I actually say that got me banned? It must have been that sick fuck tweet to Izzy Galvez and a former NFL star, Chris Cluey. He had told everyone in Gamergate to go drink bleach. He was like, go drink bleach, and he linked to an article basically saying, oh, Sarah Nyberg did nothing wrong. I responded to him saying, go down a bottle of Clorox, and then I linked to an article kind of in a response to that one. What's strange is I got suspended temporarily, and they told me in order for me to get my account back, I had to delete that tweet telling Chris Kluwe to drink Clorox. But his tweet telling everyone to drink bleach
was fine.
It's fine. It's still up right now.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Their terms of service have a bit of a double standards.
Well, it's remarkable, isn't it? I alluded to this a bit earlier when I suggested that Twitter and Facebook have a big problem here because of the politics of the sorts of people who work there and the culture that has evolved around these companies has given rise to an absurd situation, which is that you can get banned for mocking social justice warriors and feminists, but if you are an ISIS recruiter, you will find them very sluggish to suspend you. Yeah. Now that sounds funny, but it isn't. And it is a sort of daily reality of anybody with a particular. It's not even a political commitment, really, is it? It's anybody who believes in two things I think are important, which are the virtues of free speech and ridicule. Ridicule should be very, very comfortably protected by the First Amendment. On Twitter, it seems that it isn't, and nobody can really ever give an adequate explanation as to why not, except to draw a line under the, except to point to the hypocrisy.
About that, I actually still have not gotten an honest response from Twitter about what was the actual tweet that got me banned. I've submitted 5 different appeals. I've gotten no responses, just a same automated response saying that your account was banned for rule violation. Here are the rules. I read them. What rule did I violate? No response every time. And I figure that, yeah, they change their terms of service when it suits them.
And because this system is so opaque, and it's opaque by design, of course, because they don't want to get involved in sort of he said, she said arguments. And I think from their decisions, they've made it clear. They've shown us without having to tell us what their beliefs are and what sort of people they just don't want on the network. They've demonstrated that they keep these terms of service purposefully opaque, so they don't have to give you specific reasons. So they can simply identify you as the wrong sort of person for the club, and kick you out. And the only sort of highest profile example I can think of is Charles Johnson, who is a conservative journalist who's not without his problems. He said some outrageous things on the internet. He'd be the first person to admit that. But he's now been permanently banned. Plenty of people in Gamergate have been permanently banned for what I would consider to be relatively inoffensive infractions of this vague code. I myself was suspended for an extended satire about Ian Miles Chong, in which I imagined his parents calling him down for dinner and him saying, "Just a minute, Mom, haven't finished sacrificing a goat to the soul of Adolf Hitler," or whatever it was. I can't remember, his dad complaining that he'd daubed 88 over the door again, or whatever it was. I've since made up with Ian on another stream, and he seems all right. I think he was taken in by a lot of this stuff. But there's a difference, isn't there, John, between, let's say, Ian Miles Chong, who, by all accounts, said some silly things about National Socialism in his past, and has now kind of addressed it and atoned for it and is trying to move on with his life, and Sarah, the sort of sustained, prolonged, extraordinary commitment to what we might call paedophile rights.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Ian Miles Chong apologized for all that, I mean, first he blamed it on gamer culture, and then eventually he made a real, genuine apology and made things right. But when you look at what Sarah wrote on Medium.com, her "I was a teenage edgelord" piece, nowhere in there does she mention pedophilia or her cousin or anything of that. It's just a deflection. The whole thing was just it was like a spun up redemption narrative.
Yeah.
And that's I don't know. That was kind of the marked difference between those two people, is that Ian did own up to what he said, and he said, it's wrong, and he kind of saw the light. And in her case, she just doubled down.
I'd like to ask you, going back to 7 years ago, various different instances and occurrences. What your impression of the environments that Sarah Nyberg ran, the sort of communities and chat rooms that she ran? What's your impression of the sort of the ages of the people there? And what was, I mean, I'm imagining that people didn't talk about pedophilia all day, every day. What were they talking about most of the time? What were people into in those environments?
Well, I mean, a lot of times we'd just be shooting general shit. They'll talk about video games or video game music or movies or anything like that, but nothing really, maybe like memes here and there from 4chan, but nothing really super specified. Like I said, at the time that I had joined the FF Shrine IRC channel, most mentions of pedophilia had kind of slowed down, and you'd get a "you're a pedo here, you're a pedo there" sort of claim or just joking thing thrown out. So I always had assumed it was just some sort of in joke. But nothing. Oh, sorry.
No, carry on.
Oh no, I was going to say it was nothing really super specific that we would ever chat about.
Well, if I can just join in there, I mean,
Please do.
when I joined, it was, I mean, Sarah's paedophilia, I mean, I just want to make it clear, it was completely public. There was no secrecy around this whatsoever. It wasn't just known to like the inner circle of regular members at FF Shrine. It was, everybody knew it. I'd heard that FF Shrine was ran by this paedophile called Sarah, who was also transsexual, before I ever visited the site. And her paedophilia was almost like a running joke, in a way. Not that it was untrue in any way, just that it was taken quite lighthearted, I suppose, which seems very strange with hindsight, especially. But I think the regular members were just kind of a bit tired of it, because she just went on and on about it. Yeah.
I see. So they were almost fatigued by the regularity with which she would bang on about it.
Yeah, I mean, at one point she banned this member who was a rather popular regular member, and we created this alternate chat channel because we still wanted to talk to the guy. And most of our time spent in there was basically spent kind of dissing Sarah, and most of it was just like, "Oh, I'm a pedo. Well, here's a picture of my cousin," or stuff like that. So it was, yeah, I think people were mostly just tired of it. It was taken just really lightheartedly. People were just sick of Sarah's pedo shtick. She just went on and on, day after day, often getting in debates about it. She often felt pedophiles were kind of persecuted in a way. They were unfairly targeted. She hated that perverted justice site with a passion. She felt that was very that vilified pedophiles to quite a bad degree, and she was very pissed off with that. It was day in, day out. Yeah.
What did she believe that? Actually, I just want to bring Em in because I think she was trying to say something.
Oh no, it did really seem like sort of an in-joke, and at the time I was 15, 14, so I hadn't had any real idea of what pedophilia was. I mean, I knew what it was, like, from the news, the whole
In an
Catholic,
abstract sense.
exactly, but never had any personal experience with it, so it was something I took very lightly, made jokes about because it was little edgelord myself, and any mention of Sarah potentially being a pedophile just seemed also like a joke.
Right, but you discovered with your private interactions with her that perhaps it wasn't.
Yeah, and it was one of those hindsight is 2020 when you see the logs that were posted just recently that I wasn't privy to until the articles were released, and then considering the private chats, that really makes it click.
And if I can jump in here for a second,
Please do.
the whole age play thing that she did with UM, you were far from the only person she did it with. There was a user who went by Tihi Misha-san, who was 14 at the time, and she did the exact same thing with her. There were several members throughout the years of logs that I've seen who she referred to as mommy and made exactly the same kind of comments. So you were, as far as I can tell, not an isolated case at all.
Yeah.
Did you ever tell anybody about what was happening at the time, or did you sort of just get swept up in it?
I never told anyone. My parents were actually kind of absent through my teenage years, and in response to the chat, I did know what pedophilia was in an abstract sense, as Milo put it, but it never had clicked on how that affects the people who are actual victims of child pornography or any other acts of pedophilia. So it was one of those things where, as a kid, you can tell yourself, this is completely disconnected, it's never going to come back, just avoid it, and it's going to stop eventually, and that's usually just not the case.
Did this have any effect on you sexually in real life?
No.
I mean, sorry if that's overly personal. I mean, I presume this hasn't had any lasting effect on you or done you any sort of harm. It sounds like it hasn't, but it was more just of an unpleasant experience you went through. This hasn't lingered with you or anything like that.
Definitely not until I had seen, like I said, it never drew any sort of connection with any of the pedophilia jokes or any of the chats until I saw the chats I hadn't been a part of, and that's when it clicked and made me feel pretty disgusting and complicit. So I would say
made you feel as though you'd sort of enabled her, or that you felt complicit because...
Oh, no, more so, yes, that I was enabling her behavior.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem like I'm just being an edgelord, when it's repeated contacts and private contacts of people. Now I know more than just myself privately. So the edgelord defense, I would think, kind of falls apart at that point. But it definitely made me kind of ill for a couple of days. I just got over it. It's something in the past that you can be embarrassed of just as you are anything else. And I wasn't ever physically affected by it, so...
Sure. All right. I'm going to throw the discussion open to all of you now, rather than coming to people in turn. I know I was wending my way around to Frozen just now, but let me throw the whole thing out to you all publicly, because I have a couple of journalistic inquiries, really. One of them is the biggest question about all of this stuff, I suppose, as far as risk and danger goes, is how much of this spilled over into the real world. We know that Sarah Nyberg had repeated and prolonged contact with her relative Alice. We know that she took pictures of her without her consent, uploaded them to strangers on the internet, or at least people who were at that time strangers. We know that she provided enough identifiable information for this young girl to be found, and indeed she was. Did you collectively ever see any indication that there were other real-world consequences to this behavior, or any other people like Alice that Nyberg had taken a shining to, or was her what looks like an obsession directed really at one person?
I've seen that she gets really enamored with people. It's not specifically one person. It seems to be whoever the flavor of the week is. This is my take.
I can agree with that. We were pretty decent friends, I guess I would say, at the time, and I think that's one of the reasons that we had those inappropriate chats, because it was pretty open to any sort of friendly relationship online. I was really stupid at the time, so I feel like that probably is one of the reasons that she chose to message me that type of thing, because I was really kind to her and didn't really make fun of her a whole lot or anything like that.
There's a question from the chat. I'm happy to open up questions for the chat. I can't promise to ask everything that you enter in there, but if there's something that you'd like to know, something you think is pertinent, I will attempt to wade through the shit talking and hysterics and try to find some sensible questions. If you do have any, then feel free to share them. I don't want us for this to turn into a sort of endless mammoth sort of 4-hour thing. I think we've heard enough for people to make up their own minds about the edgelording thing, and I'm grateful to everyone on the call for joining us. I think there's some time, though, for us to throw this open to the chat for some sort of questions at the end. I also will want to give everybody on the call the opportunity to sort of raise anything they haven't had the chance to say yet. I'll start off with a question that Leo has put in our Hangout chat Did you worry about Nyberg suing you for defamation just to make you lose money? Is that a question for me or for somebody else?
That was from the chat, and I think it was for you. They were questioning if Breitbart had that concern.
Oh, well, I wasn't worried personally because no. I mean, look, we went through a long legal procedure, which is why the piece took so long to arrive, for which I continue to apologise. I always miss these deadlines, but no, I don't think we were too worried about it because we were sure of our facts. There's a lot more of a robust defence in the US, sort of First Amendment defence for the press, and we were sure that what we'd found was right, which is thanks to a lot of reliable and helpful sources, some of whom have identified themselves already, and others of whom we're grateful to, and remain completely off the radar. No, I wasn't worried. I found it entertaining though when you announce these pieces are coming, and you sort of say, it'll be out Monday. And then the lawyers come up with a fresh round of edits, and you think, oh god, okay, hang on. And then you get these sort of the social justice crew will all start saying things like, see, like the lawyers won't let it through. Looking forward to seeing you get sued into hell. Now, if you consider some of the things that we have published about Sarah Nyberg, some of the things we have published about Randy Harper, some of the things we've published about Brianna Wu, Shanley Kane, we haven't had so much as one lawyer's letter from any of them. Not one. The closest that we have ever had, and I've been forbidden from telling you who this is, but you can probably work it out, is, and it was not Sarah Nyberg, but it was somebody else. Somebody did something on the internet, which we've alluded to earlier in the call, which I found remarkable, and I wrote a short story about it. And this person's response to our report, rather than threatening to sue us for defamation or objecting to any of the contents of this report, was to get in touch with us and say, you are using my copyrighted photo and I'd like you to take it down. This is interesting because it gives a bit of a psychological insight into how these people function. They don't want to argue on the merits. They just want to use sort of terms of service to get you banned from Twitter, just to make you stop talking. And with somebody like me, they know they can't argue on the facts because they'll get get slaughtered. So instead, they come up with these bizarre strategies to try and get the story taken down, or to sort of inflict one damage point against the 500 just by sort of complaining about copyright. We of course told this person where to stick it, but no, I don't. Obviously, it's always a risk when you publish a story like that, which has significant risk to somebody's reputation. There's always a danger that they will not like the true facts that you have published about them, and that they will try to make cause legal trouble for you. But here's the thing, we were extraordinarily careful and judicious about the wording that we used. We were absolutely certain of what we were publishing. We were completely, we were thorough and careful about it all. You'll notice in our report, in all of the reports actually, that we never say, we never refer to this person as a pedophile or anything even remotely close. We simply report how she described herself. And you can paint a picture of how somebody behaves over time by giving lots of examples of what they themselves say. And the same thing happened with the Randy Harper reporting. She said, she likes to go online and say, sort of unsourced smears. Well, they weren't unsourced. There was a source. The source was you. The source was what you said on the internet. And so, by and large, the approach that I've taken to reporting is to allow people to hang themselves with their own words, if you like. So no, I haven't considered it to be a huge legal risk. And as I say, of all of the reporting we've done over the last 18 months, we haven't received a single email, objection, request for correction, letter before action, summons, nothing. Not a single person has objected to anything that we have written, except to call us names on Twitter.
So effective, right?
Yeah, well, you know what? It's not going to work. And we're going to continue to publish stories about these people where we think that the facts are pertinent and have a public interest defense. In this case, I think certainly they do. Or certainly they are, rather. And yeah, this sort of their usual tactics do not work on us because we're not like other media publications. We can't be shamed into removing stories because people don't like them. And I personally do a pretty good line in social justice proof commentary
No offense, it's true, right?
Yeah, sorry, no offense, but it's true. So they find it very difficult to come for me personally, and they find it very difficult to argue with facts laid out clearly. And that's what we've been trying to do. That was a very long answer to a short question. Sorry.
So here's another question from the chat. I'm not sure if you can answer this. You can skip this all well.
Go ahead. It's only asking me questions, but sure, go ahead.
It's from the chat. I'm kind of curating these. Someone asked what happened when you had approached Alice's family. How was the reaction to it? How did they handle this new information that now, in hindsight, paints a whole different image of Nyberg?
Well, I have to be relatively careful about what I say, because obviously we have promised the family that we're not going to share the majority of the contents of the majority of our conversations. What I can tell you is that the family confirmed the facts of our story. They confirmed that they knew who this person was, and that this was indeed the person who had spent time with their daughter at the time, and the ages checked out. And they also, all I can tell you, the furthest I can go, is to say that both the mother and the father of Alice, they both told me that they had never left Sarah Nyberg alone with Alice at any time for any reason ever. And I'm not able to tell you any more than that, but I think most people will be able to fill in the blanks. Aside from that, obviously most viewers will know that her dad took to the internet and I think understandably distressed that he was seeing pictures of his daughter, who even now is, I think, not even 18. I think she was 17. Seeing pictures of her, and contextually speaking, this is very distressing for a parent. Really worrying for a parent to see pictures of their own child, along with fragments of chat logs speaking about that child in sexually graphic terms. Particularly when the speaker is a relative, the family sound very, very nice, and I don't suppose they have any issue at all with transition or life choices that Sarah Nyberg makes. They don't sound like the kind of people who have any issue with anything like that whatsoever. But they clearly did spot something in the behavior around of Sarah Nyberg around this child. They saw something they didn't like, and as a result didn't allow their daughter to spend any time with that person unsupervised. And the parents, who were very, very open and helpful and happy to discuss this, and confirmed everything that they could about our story. That's probably as far as I can go without betraying any confidences or whatever. But yeah, I mean, you can take it from me that I spoke to both mum and dad. They have a very cute answering machine message. When you call them, you can hear the dogs in the background. They have these two lovely little yappy dogs. And it put me in a good mood for the call. It was very sweet.
I do remember Sarah being a bit kind of confused back at the time of that Alice's parents seemed a bit defensive in a way of letting her be alone with Alice. I'm not sure she fully understood back then that they were kind of maybe perhaps, I don't know, onto her, but
well, it may well be that. As I say, I'm not going to speak for them, but they don't strike me as the sort of people who would have found Sarah's personal identity circumstances to be a problem. They strike me as the kind of people who are just very protective and love their daughter, and perhaps were unsettled by certain sorts of behaviour.
Yeah.
It seems much more likely to me that was it. And if you read in the chat logs, I suppose, the way in which Sarah was speaking about Alice, it's difficult to imagine some of that not spilling over into real life, and for a parent not to be able to pick up on that,
Yeah.
I think these people underestimate the amount of the amount that people will defend their kids. Like at least the pedophile advocates do, not all the SJWs. Because it's a very instinctual thing to be protective of your children. I mean, that's the parent instinct. And it just seems like, whatever, they're just kids.
I don't think many of these people have families, If you think about these sort of professional agitators on the internet, I don't think many of them have families. It's Randy, Shanley, these people don't have kids. They don't have very good relationships with their parents, by and large. Very often they have complex and colourful sexual histories. It's weird. I mean, I see nothing wrong with if Randy Harper wants to be into BDSM, good for her. But she obviously thinks there's something wrong with it because she tries to cover it up. And because she goes after people with similar sexual appetites and calls them names. And she, doesn't want to extend the same freedoms to other people that she enjoys herself. And that's the sort of arena of hypocrisy in which public figures become interesting to journalists. So, I don't have a problem with, I'm the last person on the planet who can start lecturing others about what constitutes a wholesome sex life. But what's remarkable about so many of these social justice warriors is, well, I'll be honest with you, I think a lot of them have, the women I've noticed in my research, all have, they've all pursued hyper-masculine, aggressive boyfriends, and they've all sort of, begged to be very forcibly taken. And they're the same people who are complaining about, heteropatriarchal toxic masculinity, about male violence and stereotypical male behavior. These are the people who are the direct beneficiaries of that in the bedroom. These are the people who are sort of crying out to be held down and pummeled, if you like, but who seek to pathologize that in other people. And it sort of goes to the hypocrisy we were talking about earlier, I think. And there's that sort of sexual dysfunction, the lack of good, close family bonds, perhaps lack of role models, lack of their own children. I think it perhaps explains some of what you've observed, Frozen, because these people don't have that sort of normal family life that I think quite often explains why people get so upset about things like pedophilia allegations.
Oh, sure.
They're only concerned when it is beneficial for them, basically.
Well, it stands to reason. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and be a standard bearer for social conservatism because it wouldn't fly very well with anybody on this chat or watching. But if you consider, when you remove religion and you remove family and you remove, sort of social obligation through, whether it's living in a local community, having, sort of being a scoutmaster, whatever. You remove all of those things, all the things that sort of, we'll feel very dislocated these days. We all have jobs that move around, people move around, everything's online. We live in a very sort of discombobulating and dislocating kind of life. The sort of globalized information economy. Everyone moves around, everyone changes jobs. It's difficult to sort of identify anchors in a life like that, in a life that I think a lot of us share. Things can feel a little bit chaotic and all over the place when you live online a lot, and changes that society is going through in the real world. If you don't have any of those anchors, you don't have sort of society, religion, family, any of those things, I think it's easy for your priorities to sort of turn inward toward yourself, and you stop worrying about duty and responsibility and certainly civic duty and respectability in public, and you begin to live entirely for yourself. And that sort of ego-driven sort of redemption exercise that the social justice tendency seems to represent, I think there's some validity to conservative critique of that, suggesting that it's really all down to people having nothing in their lives but themselves.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Did you want me to read more questions, or
Sure, yes, that would be lovely.
Well, actually,
my eyesight is terrible, so I'm happy for you to curate the questions, because otherwise I have to lean into the screen. So if you'd like to be question master, I will not stop you.
Okay, sure. Oh, but
did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and it took me a second to find it, but there were, as far as Alice's parents go, there was some indications in the logs that, yeah, they had some suspicion of her. I'm reading here from a log from August of 2005. Sarah saying, she's talking about Alice's father. I don't think he suspects I'm one of the queers, but he said weird things to me about Alice. Somebody else in the chat asks her what. She says, he took me aside while he was quite drunk and talked to me about Alice. At the end, he was just like, remember, she's my everything, and slapped me on the chest. It kind of came off to me like, don't you do anything to her, but subtle. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, actually, speaking of sort of Nyberg's discussion about her life, this is another question from the chat they were asking. this is from Mr. Medicare, if that's actually the same person from the chat. It's
That's
more
you,
for,
Jim. Hello.
This is for the people who were from FF Shrine. You said that if Sarah seemed to have a new obsession every week and had private conversations regarding children she liked, did she mention any others she had privately taken an interest to other than Alice, or was it just Alice the majority of the time?
See, I hadn't heard about the Alice thing directly until Gamergate. It was kind of more of a thing that was like just mentioned offhand and not really gone into. So I can't speak to this question.
As far as the flavor of the week, never was it children in my experience. There was another female member of the chat that she was pretty taken with, that she would bring up in our private conversations from time to time, but that person was an adult at the time.
I can definitely remember two, but I can't remember the usernames. But yeah, she was also definitely interested in the same way that she was perhaps with M. And there were pictures that she would kind of circulate. I remember one was where they'd just come out of the shower and they were wrapped in towels. I mean, you know, tame if you want to label it like that. But yeah, Sarah was definitely, if there was a girl who would become a member who was, you know, teenage, Sarah would definitely take more of an unusual interest simply because of who they were than you would expect. It was, yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and Kyriel on the stream that Frozen Binary did a couple months ago, he backed that up entirely. She would kind of latch on to whatever new underage girl would give her attention. And by the way, that picture of the towel, or the girl in the towel, that was the Tihi Misha song that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, that was the name, yeah.
Do we have any other interesting and appropriate questions?
Okay, here's another one I had curated from the chat. It's more of a legal question, so I'm not sure if any of us are internet lawyers, but given what we've seen...
Everyone's a lawyer on the internet, right?
Oh, right, yeah. Given the evidence we have about Nyberg, what can you glean from it that's actually actionable or illegal? What do you think that Nyberg has done? And for my own personal answer for that, I think the chat, the links to 12chan there might be something there. The site doesn't exist anymore, but if it's ever been archived or saved, that could be something actionable.
Well, potentially. The problem is, I mean, I looked this up while I was going through all the stuff that I had found. The federal statute of limitations for child porn possession is only 5 years, so unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you that I did speak to the local district attorney. And they dragged their feet on this because they considered it to be too long in the past. And also the complexity of the case, establishing that the chat logs were real, all the rest of it. The level of expense involved, given that there's no suggestion, and we have to make this clear to everyone listening, there's no suggestion, there's no evidence whatsoever that Sarah Nyberg's behavior in the real world tipped over into molestation. There's no evidence of that. It was also the judgment of the district attorney that I spoke to that if there were offences committed online, it was an awfully long time ago, and if the statute of limitations has expired on them, which it probably has, there's nothing that can be done. But even if it hasn't, the amount of work that would have to go into convincing, a judge or a jury, depending on how the case might end up, the chat logs were definitely hers, and the level of sort of technical complexity there makes it, if there's no reasonable prospect of conviction, makes it something that they would be reluctant to pursue. The exception to this, and I don't want to sort of give her the kudos of comparing her to Al Capone beyond what's obviously unavoidable, but the exception to this would be the piracy issue, which we haven't touched on in this stream because it's not really been relevant to us, but there doesn't seem to be very much doubt that FF Shrine hosted illegal pirated music content. Indeed, that was how the site made its money, and it was in many respects the site's primary purpose. Now, that's the sort of thing that is very aggressively pursued. I'm not a I'm a journalist, not an activist, so it's not the sort of thing that I wouldn't be ringing people up trying to get her in trouble about it. I just reported on it. But if there's something that has a realistic prospect of a criminal conviction in anything that's in any of our reports and our research, I was advised by a couple of people that would be it.
Well,
It's remarkable because, sorry, I'll come straight back to you. It's remarkable, really, that she apparently made so much money on that, yet couldn't pay her tax bills, and is it something in the region of $200,000 owed now? And she would also have to be very careful about repayments. If there's any indication that she has been unwilling, she's simply refused rather than being unable to pay those debts, that could give rise to incarceration, because the debts have reached such a large amount and have been going on for so long that they represent that a federal tax lien has been issued for them, which basically means that the government can take property instead of money, where it can't recover debts, which in this case are tax debts. And I know she spoke a lot in the chat logs and elsewhere about sort of gleefully about avoiding the tax man, as we call him in England. That's something she's going to have to be very careful about, because now it's a matter of public record. She needs to demonstrate to the IRS that she's making efforts to pay, or that she has no means to pay, because if either of those, if she fails to meet both of those conditions, that could give rise to arrest and a criminal charge. Which makes me wonder how she managed to afford a lawyer to look into her circumstances after my article.
Yeah, she claimed to retain a lawyer, and I don't know, it just doesn't seem realistic.
Well, obviously somebody has paid for that person, and obviously someone has paid that person directly, and she hasn't seen the money, because if she were to see the money, it would become subject to the tax lien, I think. But anyway, that's again another long answer to a short question. But I'm not an activist. Other people can do with what they want with that information. But I am advised that, realistically speaking, absent any concrete indication that something happened in real life, that there was a molestation in real life, the worst things that she could probably be done for, if you like, are tax evasion and music piracy.
No,
and one other thing, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know if this is actually legally actionable, but I think Rove can back me up on this. Sarah was doing something funny, or at least there are indications from the log. She was doing something funny with her advertiser networks, to the point where Yahoo cut her payments drastically, and when somebody asked why, she said, "I was doing something I shouldn't have been doing and got caught." And Google AdSense actually dropped her entirely because they detected a click fraud. And when Rolf talked to her directly about it, she was confused about that one, and the reason she was confused is she says, "Well, I've done plenty of shady things with other ad networks, but never with AdSense."
That would probably be a matter for the ad companies themselves to take up with her. It's unlikely to be unlikely to represent a felony, unless it falls into the category of some kind of fraud.
Yeah, I mean the internet stuff. It was. I mean, Sarah kind of got me started with the whole running websites thing. I still run a bunch of websites today, and we kind of differed on this, in that Sarah, it was always about how much money she could make from something. That was the primary concern, and she would explain all these little tricks that she would do. She used to do this thing about some TV provider in America. She set up some page where she could get referrals for signups, and she would get
DirecTV.
Like she would get like $100 for this, and she gamed Google to get up like into the top 10, and she was making a lot of money from this. She would make sites. She would basically think, what could I make the most money off next? And she would make a site on this kind of subject. So she would do stuff like clothing or a different video game series or things like that. She got members of her shrine to create content for her for this Zelda Shrine site, and then she would say she was making like $100 a week off this and so on. And yeah,
well, she actually talking huge sums. But I must I mean, I have to wonder. Maybe you have some insight into this. How much money she was really making to be able to run up tax debt?
Well, she used to share pictures of. There's one picture she shared of a check in her hand that was, I can't remember. It was at least 5 figures in dollars, and that was like a monthly payment from just one ad network. I think it was Amazon or Yahoo. And
what did she spend all the money on? I mean, that explains how she managed to run up tax debt so high.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe it's expensive to. I mean, I assume you can't transition on, health insurance in America. I don't know if that's really
can now,
expensive.
but not them.
I assume
It's
she
like
spent a lot of
changed
money on
recently.
this.
So that may have cost a couple $100,000 then. So okay. That explains it. That's not really much of our business, but okay.
I think she also lived alone at this time, so she was probably paying the expenses for her own house at this kind of. This
She covered the mortgage for the house while her mom was in prison. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was
And
the
she
claim. Sorry, there was a claim that her mother stole like 20 grand from her at some point. I want to see evidence of that, but I've heard that claim been made before.
She had 20 grand to steal, which I suppose is the point.
Yeah, it's like who the fuck just has that laying around?
She'd also often gone about. She'd like kind of hold various sites that she ran hostage in a way, like saying if I don't get so and so donations by such date, then this is all going to shut down, and and she'd invariably get the donations for this, and she'd say things like, $1.5 grand a month, which it just seems completely overblown in my opinion. I can't believe she was actually paying that much.
Doesn't reflect server costs, I suppose. All right, we can probably move on for that one because I think we're going to wander into speculation there.
Okay.
Any more questions? Anybody wants?
Well, I found one here that is a bit of speculation, so
Go ahead.
we'll see.
You can ask, and I can. We'll see.
This is from the chat. It says, what do you think would need to happen for the core of Nyberg's supporters to actually wake up and realize who they're following, who they're associating with, or do you think they never will? What is it, a conviction? What will it be?
Probably don't care, do they?
No matter what.
They probably know. They know now. I mean, they must know. They have to know. If they don't know, then they're never going to because they're too stupid. Go ahead.
I can speak a little bit to that. I'm relatively new to Twitter because I hate it. But when I had
those of us that are on it all the time hate it.
When I had set up the kind of anonymous account to tweet about this a little bit, I just checking under hashtags and mentions for Sarah noticed a lot of supporters, and they would say the only reason that this was even being brought up would be that, to demonize her under Gamergate, and it's because she's trans, and those are the only reasons, and that there's no proof and no victims. So I would bring up the private chats and basically be ignored or blocked right after. So I don't know if even any more information is going to convince people that she's done these things or there's any truth behind them, or even if they do believe these things of what she does now.
Someone in the chat mentioned that she's their shield, and yeah, it's pretty much like their defense. Oh, you hate on someone for their actions. They must be because of who they are, not what they did. So
this is the basis of identity politics, isn't it? It's one of the reasons she's so valuable to that particular slice of the social justice movement, because she's always able to call on that protective shield of transgender identity as a way of deflecting criticism by suggesting that any argument or disagreement that somebody might have with her is a function not of honest factual disagreement, but because they're transphobic. And this is, I think, a function of the progressive left that we're now all familiar with seeing, something that we're all now used to watching sort of play out in action on the internet all day, every day. And I think it's perhaps some of the reason that she's been protected, because she's someone that it's, nobody wants to be that guy. Nobody even wants to be the guy who, questions whether it's campus rape culture or, the wage gap or whatever. It's why it's left to a gay guy. It's left to me to do it, because no man wants to be that guy. Nobody wants to be the one saying, you women are lying about having a bad time. I mean, nobody wants to be that person. That person's a dick. But that person is like me or a men's rights activist. In both cases, you're right. That person is a dick. It's something similar going on. Nobody wants to be the guy who goes in hard on the tranny. But But I'll rephrase that.
Sorry, triggered.
Oh dear, we were doing so well right up until that.
I know. My bad.
We were doing so well. No, anyway, that was all I had to say. Any more questions?
Not that I'm seeing, and I'm very sorry for the... I'm certain I missed a ton, so if I missed it...
No, I think that's okay. We've been going for quite a long time, so I think now is the opportunity for me to wander through my guests and perhaps suggest, in the time-honoured tradition of television shows and debates, for them to offer some closing thoughts. So why don't you guys gather your thoughts, and perhaps, I mean, I've covered pretty much everything that I wanted to cover. I think we've gone through everything serious in the chat that I noticed and that Leo noticed. The thing that's come out of this for me is the total explosion, the dismantling of any plausible claim to edgelording, or to simply being outrageous for the sake of it. I think what's become very clear, and what will be clear to listeners, is, sitting back and hearing from people who knew Sarah 10 years ago and who had interactions with her more recently, one of whom had an extraordinary series of private interactions with her. It's now a very difficult thing, if you've listened to this stream, and perhaps any of the things I might write as a result of it being published on YouTube shortly. It's now almost impossible in good faith to claim that this behavior was simply trolling, was simply trying to upset people. And it now becomes the job of people who wish to continue to support Sarah Nyberg to explain why they're doing so in the face of overwhelming evidence that she has not only been guilty of everything that she criticizes other people for. She's not only the prime offender in every serious respect in which she goes after other people, but also that there's been no attempt at redemption, no attempt at an apology, and no attempt, more importantly, to make amends to the people that she has introduced to that sort of behavior and surrounded that behavior. She doesn't need to make an apology to me. She doesn't need to make an apology to, even though she's libeled and defamed and, said all sorts of horrendous things about me on Twitter. I don't care. I've got a thick skin. I can put up with it. But I think there are, in any case, I'm a reporter, so it's our job to do this stuff, and we're used to getting a lot of shit for it from people who don't like the facts that we publish. But I think she might owe an apology to some of the people on this call, and she might owe an apology to other people out there that we don't know about. She certainly owes an apology to her young relative, and I wonder if that's ever going to be forthcoming. I'm going to go along the line now and just ask for some concluding thoughts, and while they're coming out, I'll make sure there's nothing else left in the chat. Thank you all for coming. It's been very enlightening, and I think has moved the debate on quite significantly. We've had plenty of people engaged and interested in discussing things in the chat. So we've got Bro Team in the chat, one of my favourite streamers, and a few other familiar faces. And Jim, if that was you, thanks for coming. We're going to go along the line now and give our guests the opportunity to wrap up and say whatever they didn't get the chance to earlier on. So let's start where we began with Leo.
Thank you. I'm very glad that you hosted the stream, and I just want to thank M, Frozen Binary, Ruff, all of you for coming forward to speak sort of your experiences with Sarah Nyberg. You had no obligation to do this, but I see you're all very interested in the truth and making sure people know the truth. So I respect that for all of you. Thank you. The other thing is, even though there is nothing legally actionable that may come of this, it's important that people know. So they take the appropriate actions to make sure these kind of behaviors don't affect some of the most vulnerable users on the internet. And yeah, I'm really glad we had this stream. I'm really glad we moved this conversation forward. And for those in the chat right now asking, when will I get another Twitter account? I won't. Twitter is garbage. It's crap. And every account...
If they gave it back to you, you'd take it. Don't tell lies.
Maybe. Yeah, I would. But it's interesting because people are saying you should make another identity or a different account. And I go with that. the reason why I'm not going to do that, it's not because I have an inflated ego where I love the name Leo Pirate so much. It's that it would take so much work to get all those connections again, and only one person would have to say, this is Leo Pirate, and I'd get banned again. So I'm just not going to deal with that, and I'm quite okay.
Well, where can people get in touch with you? Obviously, previously on Twitter, people would be able to tweet you if they wanted to pick up a discussion with you or ask you something, or merely, as is normally the case with me, give you gush with praise for your beautifully produced videos. You're welcome. How can people get in touch with you now?
You could just contact me at leopirate.com. I have an ask section where you could submit stuff and submit full posts to my Tumblr. It's a Tumblr blog, so be careful for those of you who are worried by that. And yeah, I'll be posting new stuff. I have a new video coming out about a certain other, moderator from Feminist Frequency who's a convicted pedophile. But I will talk about that later. That is.
And I knew you were going to try and sneak that one in. I just need to make it clear there is no evidence or suggestion that Anita Sarkeesian ran a pedo stream, nor that she has employed or at any time, nor has she employed or at any time fraternized with a convicted sex offender until facts may come to light that suggest otherwise. Thank you. Shall we move on?
Great job.
Yes. Frozen, your opportunity to say goodbye.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me on. Appreciate Leo Pirate for actually sharing the stream I did with Kyrael. That probably helped a lot, exposing kind of some of this stuff, at least from my point of view. And I just kind of want to finish up with a warning to the people who actually kind of who defend the Sarah Butts and her ilk. You just piss people off. You're only galvanizing people against you, so you might want to have some self-reflection and whatnot.
Thank you. Let's go to John.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the whole edgelording excuse, I think the most damning piece of evidence is the fact that Sarah is still in contact with a lot of the people who knew her for over 10 years. Some of the people were in that chat since, on FF Shrine or in that IRC channel since 2002, 2003, 2004. She still talks to them, and not a single one has come out in her defense and said, yeah, she was just edgelording. Because when you look back at old forum posts, when you look at the logs, Sarah being a pedophile was something that they treated as just truth. I mean, there was no indication that it was some sort of joke or inside joke. It was they were very sincere about it. So I don't know. It's just the whole thing is just real difficult to swallow.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Let's go to M next. And I think I just want to say thank you, especially to you personally, for sharing what was obviously a very uncomfortable anecdote for you. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, definitely a bit embarrassing. But I guess, just the behavior is just far too consistent, and it edges into private contact way too often for the edgelord defense to really, I guess, kind of stack up. I would say that it was difficult to stream because I had been speaking with Sarah in more private and recent conversations before doing so, and very quickly did she switch from saying, I'm sorry if I had hurt you in the past for whatever you believe that I've done, to you're abusive, you're joining this witch hunt. I think she legitimately feels that people really want to hurt her, and I felt definitely guilty when she started saying things like that to me. But also, you can take away a message from this that if you are part of a sort of social justice movement, there are going to be wolves in sheep's clothing, and a lot of times very publicly they will seem supportive of your cause, but in the past or even behind closed doors, if you're not with them, then you're completely against them. They will turn you into the enemy even if they've wronged you in the past. So just to, it's, I guess, a message to her supporters that you should take every word she says with a little bit of a grain of salt, because not everything she says is entirely truthful, and I don't believe that she's very sorry for what she's done. I think she's more sorry that she's been caught.
Thank you. That was a very eloquent summary. I think the last person we have is Paul. Please go ahead. I know that you have deep and excellent knowledge and memory of all of this stuff, so we'll give you the final word. We did everybody, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
so let's give you the final word.
I mean, I know you're watching this, Sarah, or you're going to watch it. I mean, we both know what you said. You say it to me often, you would say it to others. You would often go on at length about how you're a paedophile, advocating for it relevantly, and often your own arguments for paedophilia were that it was basically your sexual orientation, that, you know, by your arguments, one's a paedophile, always a paedophile. So I don't really have a qualm with people calling you a paedophile now, even though perhaps I'm sure you wish with hindsight that you perhaps weren't so open about it. I mean, people know the truth about you. It isn't harassment to say the truth about you. Truth you don't like doesn't equal harassment. As much as you wish it did, that's not the way things are. And, you know, trying to get people banned, trying to silence or censor people for this is just a load of bullshit, and it only serves the opposite purpose. It only brings it more into the spotlight, the stuff that you did, the kind of person that you are, and the things that you did. And, you know, you're not helping your cause with this kind of stuff. Trying to play this edgelord defense doesn't get you anywhere except back you further into the hole that you've dug yourself into. And apart from your supporters, the people who just blindly swallow anything you say, hook, line, sinker, it doesn't help whatsoever. I think you should just admit what you did. You know, it's not great, I'm sorry to say, but things are the way they are. You know, you have to come to terms and accept that. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that probably summarizes things perfectly. Unless anybody else has anything else they'd like to contribute, I think it's a good place for us to end. I would like to thank everybody for coming to listen, and to all of my guests, all of you guys, for sharing your stories. It can be difficult sometimes to come forward with something that's very awkward or even embarrassing. I mean, just being around and, you know, participating in some of these discussions can be embarrassing to sort of bring it up. Yeah. But you know, I mean, I think everybody understands that. Everybody knows that everybody's done bad things. You know, everybody has embarrassed themselves. Everybody has been silly. Everybody has sought attention. I think what I've learned in my reporting career is that those people who turn their lives around, or who grow up, even just grow up, are the people who come to terms with their past, make amends for it where necessary or appropriate, are open and honest about it, and use those experiences to grow, rather than attempting these sorts of frantic, desperate, ultimately dishonest U-turns that involve backpedaling and silencing and a panic when things come out. The people I know in life that I most admire, and the people that I have known who've been most successful, are the people who come to terms with their pasts and who use those pasts to become better people. And it's been my experience that you can either respond to whether it's trauma or whether it's your own misdeeds in the past by lashing out at other people, by trying to control how other people live, which is the social justice route. Or you can go through life with humility, honesty, decency, a love of free expression and creativity and freedom of speech, and explore the wonderful, crazy, wacky world with you know, all of the insane people you'll meet along the way. Thanks very much, everybody, for joining us. This has been Miley Anopoulos, the technology editor of Breitbart News, and my guests have been my guests. Give yourselves a little round of applause. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us in the chat. You may continue the conversation on Twitter with the hashtag 2spooky, number 2, and the word spooky. Reference, of course, to the fact that we should have done this at Halloween, which is my fault. Sorry we didn't, but I think we can all admit that some of the contents have been spooky enough to justify it. Thanks so much to everybody for joining us, and goodbye. Good night.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.